It's time once again for First and 10, presented by Allstate with Sporting News college football writer Matt Hayes. I'm Stephen Levine in the Sporting News studio. Matt, have you been practicing your Warhawks cheer?
I have not, but I got a feeling that John L. Smith's been hearing it in his sleep over the last 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, his nightmares. I mean, come on. The Arkansas Razorbacks stunned by University of Louisiana at Monroe just a couple of days after head Arkansas coach John L. Smith filed for bankruptcy. You're not so sure that was a coincidence.
Well, I think when you start to really break down what happened there at Arkansas, obviously with Bobby Petrino running his career into a ditch on his motorcycle, and then Arkansas hiring John L. Smith, who, you know, let's be honest, has a little history of bat crazy. Okay? So you hire a guy who's got a little of that in him, knowing that. Then you also know that he's in the middle of filing for bankruptcy. Oh, by the way, which the number one stressor in America, Stephen? Money. So what do? You hire a guy who's in the middle of going through bankruptcy, and then 2 days before a game against little old La Monroe, he officially files for bankruptcy. John L. Smith does. And the next thing you know, Tyler Wilson gets hurt. The Warhawks win in overtime, and now here we are with Arkansas looking like they look, a team ready to implode.
Yeah, but things will just get easier because they take on Alabama this coming weekend.
Right. If it doesn't get any harder, right? Here comes Alabama, which basically looks like an NFL team right now. Now, that's half a joke, but if you look at Alabama, very few weaknesses, rolling into Fayetteville, getting ready to, you know, show Arkansas what it's like to play big man football, as Missouri likes to call it, old man football. In this case, it'll be big man, strong man, here we come at you man football.
Well, there were a couple of other upsets in week 2 of college football, especially in the Big Ten, where Nebraska got upset by UCLA, where Wisconsin got upset by Oregon State. Penn State is now 0-2. Ohio State's ineligible to appear in a bowl game. Is the Big Ten resting their hopes on the broad shoulders of Northwestern?
At this point, it looks like that. That or Ohio State. I keep hearing people talk about Ohio State, how Ohio State could go unbeaten and look at this great team, and it's the mean purple, Stephen, at Northwestern. Why not? You build a big lead against Syracuse, you give it up, you win the game, you beat the SEC's Vanderbilt, you're 2-0, and everybody's feeling good, as opposed to losing to Oregon State, losing to UCLA. I think when you look at the Big Ten, when you start talking about people saying, oh, look, Michigan State is this big, bad team, Michigan State struggled at home, probably could have lost at home to a Boise State team that was replacing 15 starters, Stephen, and a starting quarterback. Brand new quarterback on that team. And they really struggled to beat that team. Or you're on the basically the shoulders of Michigan, which just looked awful against Alabama. Or you're on the shoulders of Ohio State, which last year lost 7 games. And I think people are forgetting that. Somehow Ohio State is ranked 12th in the country in the Associated Press poll. They've played no one. They've beaten no one. But because Urb is there, because the all-powerful Urban Meyer is now coaching at Ohio State, everyone forgets those 7 losses from last year from this exact same team. It's a bad year right now in the Big Ten.
Well, there's also another perennial powerhouse sort of rebuilding under Jimbo Fisher at Florida State, and they have beaten Murray State and Savannah State by a combined score of something like 9,721 points. But they take on Wake Forest this weekend, and you're of the mind that that's a better litmus test than beating Florida or Miami or Virginia Tech later in the season.
I think when you look at Florida State, Stephen, you look at this program, and you look year after year after year about everyone saying, this is it for Florida State. This is the year they become Florida State again. And I'm just as guilty as anybody because I've done it many times. This program has lost 4 of the last 6 games to Wake Forest. Little old Wake Forest, Stephen. They recruit better than Wake Forest. They have better players than Wake Forest. They have better facilities than Wake Forest. They have better everything than Wake Forest, okay? Still can't beat them. One of those losses was a 30-0 loss in Tallahassee. So if I'm Florida State, let's not focus on national championships. Let's not focus even on next week's game against Clemson. Let's focus on beating Wake Forest, period.
Do they do themselves a disservice by opening up against Murray State and Savannah State? Should they have tested themselves a little bit more in the early weeks of the season, getting ready for their ACC schedule?
I think you got to give them a break at some point a little bit there. The first week against Murray State, everybody does that. Second week, Savannah State should have been the West Virginia game. But, of course, we all know West Virginia pulled out because the excuse was, they're going to the Big 12. Not because they didn't want to play Florida State, because that's the reason why they pulled out of the game. Not because of the Big 12.
All right, that's Matt Hayes, college football writer for Sporting News. I'm Stephen Levine in the Sporting News studio. We'll be back again next week with another edition of First and 10 presented by Allstate.